a new license with an emergency clause, which the intent apparently is to have it done at this meeting, that now as part of the mode of doing business as a hotel, motels providing shuttles, and now all of a sudden we're going to require them another business license?
They already have a business license. It's been in the category 199. Other businesses, it's the catch-all category, and the amount is the same. It's not a new charge for hotel shuttles. It's just a different name. And the reason we didn't, months ago, if you'll look at the old agendas, you'll see that the discussion, my requesting discussion about the taxi and limo franchises was going on months ago. The workshop, we haven't had time to have that workshop, just like we haven't had time to have several workshops that you've requested. We're now at crunch time. The licenses are going out. This is one minor step in a positive direction. The other steps can be taken later when we have some time, hopefully.
Mr. Mayor.
I have questions about requiring a business license for a business that doesn't have any exchange of money. There's no fees charged. I mean, what is the business that's being conducted here? This is a service from a hotel who already has a business license. There's no charge to their passengers to be shuttled around the city. So I'd have to agree with Mr. Pownall. I don't see where there's a need to have a business license. There's no exchange of monies.
Anybody else? Ms. Brown?
If we're getting hung up on Section 2, we could actually strike Section 2 from this ordinance and go ahead with it like that. And we actually don't need an emergency clause necessarily. If we pass this in 3 readings tonight, it will go into effect in 30 days, and then it will be in effect when it needs to be in effect at the beginning of the year. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question, though, in relation to what James just said. The previous purchase of licenses for the hotel and motel shuttles, it sounds as if, in addition to taking it out of this, your suggestion is to strike any fee for that. Is that correct? I'm not objecting, I'm just asking.
Okay, I'll play along. No, I see no reason why we're regulating a part of a business that does not collect a fee. It is merely value added to the business that already has probably half a dozen licenses already.
I could work with that easily.
That's a separate issue. Right now we're talking about this, and if we want to do away with the hotel, motel, shuttle business licenses, that actually should be a different issue. Right now we're talking about clarifying business licenses. So, with all due respect, that's out of order.
It's in the proposed order.
Actually, it is in order because it's on the ordinance.
Yes. Section
And
2.
it says
But
Section 2
if-
hotel, motel, shuttle, so it is part of the discussion.
Well,
So we either take it in or we leave it out. That's part of the discussion.
Okay. I'll go along with that.
But
we're
I'm
not here.
sure-
But we're not here,
Mr.
right?
Mayor,
Yes.
but I'm not sure. I'm still confused with the emergency clause because both the taxi and limos pay a $50 business license. When they're sent out, are they sent out as a taxi business license? And a limo gets sent out a limo license, or do they get sent out a taxi/limo license?
When I first came here, I noticed that there were a couple limousine services that were in the 199 catch-all category instead of being licensed as taxi limos. And I thought, oh no, this is odd. As time went on, it became clear to me why the previous clerk chose to do that. And that day happened when a fellow walked in and he said, I want a license to run a limousine. I look in the book, I see taxi limo. I said, well, you realize the laws are different for taxis than they are for limos. He goes, I'm not going to operate like a taxi. I just want to run a limousine service.
I'm still confused, Mr. Mayor, because it still seems...
Point of order.
You
Well-
address me the point of order, not him.
Point of order. She was speaking. She had the floor.
Well, then address it to me and I'll deal with it, okay?
Point of order.
Okay.
She had the floor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Point well taken. Go right ahead.
The fellow looked me right in the eye. He said, I do not want to act like a taxi. I want a limousine service. I naively gave him a taxi limousine business license. Whereupon, within 10 minutes, I was getting phone calls saying he was pulling over on the side of the road saying, do you want a ride? And the limousine drivers who had the catch-all category licenses were very upset because he was the only one in town with a license that said taxi limousine. Everyone else had a business license that was in the catch-all category 199. So that plays out that he is the only limousine driver in Eureka Springs who can behave like a taxi because he has the license. I was foolish. I am now wiser. I am trying to solve a problem I inherited. That's all.
Mr. DeVito.
Well, through definition of what it constitutes a taxi cab, it says refers only to motor vehicles having a seating capacity not in excess of 7 passengers. So that limousine driver was in violation of the ordinance, and he could be cited for it. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
There's actually a tremendous amount of law in the state.
Excuse me?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You can call on whoever gets to speak here.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
That's it.
Okay. It is what it is before you. You either leave stuff in or take it out. You can amend it. Doc,
Make a motion, we take section 2 out.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion on it? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
You have to roll call it again. Mr. Pownall?
I move we remove the emergency clause.
Second.
Motion to remove the emergency clause made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion clauses, the emergency clause is out.
And so is section 2.
In section 2, yes. Okay. So we have before us an ordinance with a section, one section, dealing with taxis and limos. Mr. Pownall?
Just, again, point of clarification, do we not need to reference Chapter 4.32 in this ordinance? Since it's already there. If it wasn't there, then I could see when it's codified, they would assign it to the appropriate section. But since we're amending something that is in code by reference,
Mr. Wood?
It is not required that codification numbers be included in the ordinance to change them. The code service will do that. It is often done for clarification so that council members will know what they're looking at, but it's not required.
Mr. Johnson?
I would move to assign a number to this ordinance and read it for the first time. And approve. Read it.
Just assign number and read.
I would move to assign a number to this ordinance and put it on its first reading.
Second.
Motion to add the number and put it on its first reading? Made and seconded. We'll roll call that one. Excuse me.
Discussion?
Yeah, I thought we'd been discussing it. Go ahead.
Well, if the issue is that we have a limousine operating as a taxi cab, we have 42402, the definition of a taxi cab. If the limousine is able to seat in excess of 7 persons and operates as a taxi cab, it's in violation of our ordinance and should be cited. So to me, this is a matter of enforcement, not a matter of defining, because it is clearly defined in our taxi cab franchise that the limousine driver is violating the ordinance.
Mr. Raphael?
We do have fines, and it is a matter of enforcement. But I think for the purposes of this, it's to make the treasurer's job easier and to get it up front so the people know what they have when they're buying that license.
With all due respects to the clerk's job, we don't have an ordinance regulating limousines. So we're going to separate these two and allow limousines to operate with no guidance. At least they fall under the taxi cab franchise, which regulates them. So if we grant a separate status for a limousine, we have no ordinance to regulate them. I'm sorry that that the first of the year is coming up, but I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves on this one.
Okay. Ms. Clark?
You're correct that there isn't anything in the ordinance in our ordinances about regulating limousines. There is a body of state law that's very specific. There's a body of federal regulations that's very specific. And I was hoping to gradually move the ordinances back into sync with state and federal law. This was intended to be a first step. If we're not able to separate the two, I can only see issuing the catch-all category business license for everyone, because there's no way to untangle it without a great deal of research and hard work. I'm willing to do that. It's okay with me, whichever way it goes.
And I will reiterate that the instance that was cited by the clerk is regulated by our taxi cab franchise. So it was a violation. That person should be cited. They had a vehicle that would seat more than 7 people and was operating as a taxi cab. So I feel we need to get a limousine ordinance in place before we act like Solomon here and try and separate the baby. There's procedure, and I feel that, we've been going about this, for the last few years. Suddenly there's this fire that we've got to put out, but I just feel that the enforcement issue is what comes into play here. And I hesitate sending out limousines without a city ordinance regulating them.
So we have a motion on the floor. This is a discussion phase of an amended ordinance that took out section number 2 in the emergency clause. So we need to deal with this issue. Scrap it, start over with the defining limousines. Get those ducks in a row before you take off on that ordinance regulating.
We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah. So, excuse me.
Sign a number for its first reading.
Okay. The motion is to assign the amended ordinance number and place it on the first reading as amended. That's right. That's the way I understood it. Roll call.
Dr. Kirkpatrick,
Yes.
Mr. Raphael,
Yes.
Mr. DeVito,
No.
Mr. Pownall,
No.
Mr. Berry,
No.
Ms. Ballance.
Yes.
3-3.
Okay, motion failed. Now, if somebody wants to introduce a motion to bring another ordinance to the table defining these two entities and deal with it from that standpoint, I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I'm getting the definitions in first before start regulating it. It's easier that way if you know what you're dealing with. Okay, motion made and seconded to reintroduce a ordinance defining the two by state statute and municipal statute. That'd be a fair assessment,
Yes.
Mr. Pownall?
Clarification of definition of service or of the
Everything.
vehicle.
Both. You have to define what that vehicle does before you can
Okay. Just want to make sure.
regulate it. Yes, ma'am.
Point of information, will that include the reference to the state
It'll
ordinances
include
and so
whatever
forth?
y'all ask it to, because he'll draw it up. So that's what we're at right now, is the defining stage. Excuse me. Okay, Mr. Weaver, did you get the kind of the gist of the motion to formulate an ordinance that defines taxis and limos by state, federal, local, all the above laws, what they do, what they can't do? Yes, ma'am.
Will this be one ordinance or two?
It should be one ordinance. If we scrap this one, thank you. Scrap this one and start over. That way you've got a clear base on what you're basing it. Yes, sir.
Well, we have a pretty comprehensive taxi cab ordinance, so all we're really looking for is a limousine ordinance.
Okay. Mr. Pownall?
I wasn't around other than an innocent bystander, but I think we need to look at Ordinance 2051 that got rejected by the voters to make sure we don't.
2051?
How we the new ordinance.
Okay. So my understanding of where we're at right now, we've scrapped this one. Is that correct? We've started on the. Go ahead.
What was it again, please?
3-3.
Good thing.
3-3?
Mhm.
Isn't that a tie?
It is, and
You have to have four to pass.
That's okay.
Four to pass.
I can't vote no.
Sorry,
I just have to be quiet that way it feels.
That's right, you're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now, since we do have a taxi ordinance in place, but we don't have a limo ordinance, you can amend the motion to have Mr. Weaver research the limousine part of this, add it to the existing taxi ordinance, and deal with them both in one ordinance. What's that mean?
there's
Yeah, I would
much
amend-
more to it than that. It's really much more complex than that, and it goes back to the franchise having been issued for a taxi. It's, please, just believe me, there's cannot all be put in one ordinance.
We have an ordinance for taxis, and we'll
Right.
start over and do it on a limousine. That one's not been dealt with yet.
I
but it
would
is
move to instruct the city attorney to adopt a ordinance regulating limousine service within the city of Eureka Springs.
Second.
made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
So you're amending the original motion?
Correct. So the vote was on the amended.
Okay, hang on a second. Now restate the original motion as amended, and we'll go back and vote on that one. Yes, ma'am.
There have been times at this table when we've been talking about something and a motion didn't pass, and I recall specifically trying to bring forward another motion, and you said that we were done talking about it and we couldn't talk about it anymore. So why in this case are we going on and on and on, doing the same thing that you said that I couldn't do?
I don't have a clue what you're talking about. When? And how's it pertinent to
5
this?
meetings ago.
Okay, and how's it pertinent to this?
Because
This
because
specific
I'm wondering
item here.
why sometimes we're allowed to do certain things and sometimes I'm not allowed to do the exact same things. I was just wondering why.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Hang on.
the ordinance that we failed to pass was about separating taxis and limousines. What we are addressing right now is the creation of an ordinance regulating limousines.
That's my understanding. That's what we're trying to do.
So I don't see that we're trying to revisit the same thing again. In effect, we are trying to create what we do not have in place as a city,
That's where I
which
thought-
is an ordinance regulating limousines.
That's where I thought we were going to. Yes, ma'am.
Then perhaps that needs to be a new point, a new piece of business put on the next agenda
That's what we're working on. to get it
instead of
the
going on.
agenda.
Well, then we got agenda setting coming up down here.
Okay, but first we have to have a motion and something to put on the agenda. That's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to work on with an amended motion to pass it, to get it on the agenda to be dealt with by Mr. Weaver. Is that correct? Is that my assumption correct? Or am I just out in space on this?
It's okay. I'll add this to the file I'm fixing up for the Ethics Committee.
Oh, knock it out.
Got
Go
it,
ahead.
baby.
Point of information, we've routinely, as we've gone through something that's pertinent, added if there's a need for putting it on the next agenda. I believe the intent, and I may be wrong, for the agenda setting was to be able to allow new items to be brought to the table during agenda setting. So there has been nothing out of the ordinary. We've changed procedure with this one over what we've done in the past. Because invariably there have been agenda items directing the city attorney to do such and such, asking the city clerk to do whatever, asking the finance director to do whatever, the mayor, and I don't see this one as any different than those. In all due respect to Ms. Balance's concern. Move to discuss item 5 under new business.
Okay, we still have a
Finish
motion.
this one?
Yeah,
We have a
need to finish
motion.
this one yet. Okay, if you'll
We
read
got a
the
motion.
motion as amended, that's where we're at now.
For Mr. Weaver to write an ordinance for limousines.
Any questions on the motion as stated? Yes, ma'am.
What was the motion we passed right before this one?
Yes.
There was not a vote on the original motion, but it was to reintroduce an ordinance to define limousine services, and it just got tweaked a little bit on the second round.
Okay, thank you.
So if you can read the amended ordinance, we'll deal with that. Again.
Direct the city attorney to write an ordinance regulating limousines in the city.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't hear any nay votes, so motion carried. All right, Mr. Weaver, you have it. Now, number 5,
Move to discuss.
Second.
resolution for Art Wall and North Main parking lot. Okay. The Arts Council has brought before you a resolution to use certain city property with other.
Move to read the resolution for discussion purposes only.
Second.
Made and seconded to read for discussion only. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we shall read it.
A resolution in support of the use of certain city property for the public display of art. Whereas the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, in an effort to promote business for the city, and whereas the mission of the Mayor's Arts Council is to advocate for the arts and to encourage, empower, and coordinate a sustainable arts economy through the diverse creative community of artists and arts organizations in Eureka Springs. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, that Section 1, the Mayor's Arts Council is approved to use certain city-owned property for the display of art as follows. Eureka Springs Art Park display located in the First Street parking lot and the off-the-wall display located on 23 North Main entrance to town. Section 2, that said period of use shall be no more than blank years with renewal possible by future resolution. Section 3, that the Mayor's Arts Council is hereby authorized to develop guidelines, rules, and regulations with regard to said displays as necessary.
Floor is open for discussion. This is where the other unnamed place used to be. We cannot say. Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's a great thing for the art community in Eureka Springs, and it's my understanding that 100% of the proceeds will go to the artists.
Is that how you understand it to the council, art council?
Well, I didn't read my paperwork, but I don't think so. I think it was a percentage goes to the artist and a percentage goes into a fund back for the art wall and stuff like that for public art.
Maintenance.
Yeah.
Because that's still a laudable arrangement.
Yes, sir.
And the CDP unit is funding its nonprofit doing the money.
When is this potentially to kick off? If this is
First, they need your okay to read.
We're wanting to have it kicked off on May Festival of the Arts now, and so they just need approval and, and present it before the artists do
Yes, sir.
why I ask is because we've got to come up with a number for the years, and if it's going to take them 7 months, 6 months to be ready, basically 7 months from now, I'd recommend we put 2 years with renewal possible. But we need to specify the 2 years from what date, and I would use the date of the resolution.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Second.
I guess you just made a motion. He seconded it. All in favor of adding 2 years to the blank on section number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll do that when we have the number 2. Yes, sir.
I move we assign a resolution number and approve as amended.
Second.
Motion to add a number and approve as read with the addition of the number 2 in the year section of section number 2. Is that motion clear as mud?
Resolution number is 589, and 2 is entered. We don't need to read the whole thing again, do we?
No, just
Discussion if anybody wants to.
yeah. Any further discussion on it? No, we'll go ahead and read it.
We already read it.
We don't
Okay,
need
that
to.
was right. That's
All we
right.
got to do
Yeah.
is vote.
Yeah. We will call it.
Mr. Berry,
Yes.
Dr. Kirkpatrick,
Yes.
Mr. Raphael,
Yes.
Ms. Ballance,
Yes.
Mr. DeVito,
Yes.
Mr. Pownall,
Yes.
6-0.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda is number 6, Climate Protection Update, Mr. Pownall and Mr. Raphael.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Discussion's open. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
I'm just concerned based on the last email I received. I understood that this was through a grant that this was being done. Now all the meetings have been canceled. They're going to continue accepting input until the 15th. And I'm just wondering if anybody can provide us input. If we give them no input, where do we go with this? Are we just going based on what they recommend? Is there any action? Because apparently the meetings that they had that council members attended, there wasn't any apparent other than the economic development part available to show any support from the city, because a lot of the things that they addressed would futuristically, if I understood it right, would take some action at this table. And now they've canceled any inputs for future meetings, and I just wonder where we stand with this grant.
Can you update us on that? The last I understood is Mr. Brown is now in Arizona, and he's wanting to do everything by email, which is not kosher.
I've been out of the office on vacation, but from my understanding is that he still will do a guidelines for us, but it still needs to come for the approval of the mayor. I mean, he's still putting it together, the last I've heard from him, and it will submit it to us and the council to look at and see before it's like the approved climate protection agreement, the guidelines for the city to go by. And now I know Butch has been corresponding with him about, but that's for the green grant, that's something else, I'm sorry.
But it's all tied together, isn't it?
Yes, it's all tied together. All you have to do, his part of this is to provide a plan to help us reduce emissions. And he's looking at transit, he's looking at tourists coming in, looking at things we can implement, encouraging more pads, more emission with, like natural gas trolleys, which is not doable at this time. But he's looking at all those aspects. And so he's just still kind of compiling information, and that's the last I know. I haven't seen anything in hard document. He did move to Arizona, but I believe he's still working with us from my last email.
I was just curious if there need to be any support from this table, or if that's strictly administrative.
We're trying to stay on top of him when you communicate with us.
He basically canceled out of everything else that was scheduled. If he moved, I can understand that.
Mr. Barry.
Well, I didn't attend any of the climate group meetings, so I don't know, but I have been involved in the other grants on this facility and the courthouse and the transit facility, and how we had solar hot water for the transit that got approved and installed. Got lights for the parks. We had some windows. We got a grant on the auditorium for storm windows. And I don't know why and how it came about, but the grant was really for about half the cost of what storm windows cost. And then last week, I got an email from Ray over at the auditorium telling us we've got a heating problem. One of our heater coils went out, and it's about a $6,000 cost to repair it for the auditorium. And I remember in talking with Nick at one point, he said when we were doing this that part of the grant could go for heating and cooling it toward the auditorium. And I had been, when I received the information from Ray, I asked him at that time if we could reroute that window grant and put it toward the heating and cooling. And he said he didn't think there'd be a problem for it. It would be a lot more easier to defend from energy conservation standpoint. We'd have a lot better energy cost savings by doing that than the storm windows. And so I've been working with Don Matt and Glenna and Nick trying to talk to Windrock to get their approval. And then we can go through the process. because then we'll have about $130,000 that we can put in toward the auditorium heating and cooling, which would go a long ways in helping that situation. But again, it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the climate control group, but it's all part of the same grant systems, from what I understand.
Any further? Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, we'll take it off the agenda.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take number 6 off the agenda. Okay. Number 7,
Move to discuss.
workshop on council goals for 2011-2012. Go ahead.
I'd like to, since this is the
Is
only...
there a second on that one? I didn't hear a second.
Second.
Okay. Yeah. My bad.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I got it again.
Since this is our only official meeting in November, I'd like to propose just to get a starting point, a workshop to finalize this, or at least get us going in the right direction for next Thursday at 3 o'clock.
For when, next Thursday?
Can't do it.
That's it, as a starting point. I'd like to get one set since we don't have any meetings the rest of the month.
I'm objecting to the time.
Okay. 6 o'clock?
Yeah, 5:36.
5:30?
Thursday, 5:30.
6 o'clock, please. I'll still have to take off work early even at that. But I would like to attend.
I agree with 6.
So the 10th at 6 o'clock would be my proposal.
Number 10.
Workshop Thursday the 10th at 6 p.m. in the council room, if there's no meetings. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay.
If I could interject just briefly, I've got a conflict after that, but if we can keep the workshop to an hour, hour and a half, then that would be great.
That should be ample time. Right, Doc?
Yes.
As long as we don't talk.
Okay.
Keep it for an hour
By
then.
7:30.
All right. Next on the agenda is number 8, discussion of resolution 511.
Motion to discuss.
Second?
Second.
All right. Floor is open.
My only reason for bringing this to the table is I just happened to find it and
Yeah.
trying to determine, and it wasn't any kind of hunt or anything else, and how long does a resolution last was more of the question, requiring the mayor to report projects to be bid prior to development and reporting awards to the city council. Is this still valid? Do we need to update? Do we want to consider updating it?
There's no sunset clause on it, so I'm assuming it's still in effect. When you brought it up, that's the first I heard about it, too.
It's in effect if it's not been repealed.
It's in effect. It's in effect.
Yeah, well, we do that on anything we're going to bid out. At least we have so far.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of proposals before HDC and other commissions and in the paper that was the first I'd read about it. So that's fine. Thank you. Take it off the agenda.
Well, number 9, discussion of state statute 14-235-206, sewer committee.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Second.
Floor's open.
Again, I'm getting trouble by reading 14-235-206, appointment of sewer committee. A1, capital A, the construction, acquisition, improvement, equipment, custody, operation, and maintenance of any works for the collection, treatment, or disposal of sewage and the collection of revenue from it for the service rendered by it shall be effected and supervised by a committee to be designated for that purpose by the municipal council. And it goes on for several paragraphs after that. And in contract law, shall is imperative. I don't know if in state law it is or not, or in Eureka Springs law, shall is imperative or not.
That's what we've been led to understand.
But I think with the fact that, and the reason I bring this up, I know that there's discussion about having an odd commission. We can't get people on planning. We've got a situation here that requires us by state law to have a sewer committee, if we give everybody a chance to read it before the next meeting. Right here would be a starting point for fixing long-range planning-wise the sewer problems in the city of Eureka Springs, plus following the state code.
Any further? Okay. It says in there that the governing body, council, shall appoint the committee.
For those who don't have it in front of them, it goes on, the committee will function under the control of the council to such extent as may be approved by the ordinance or resolution appointing the committee, may be removed for cause. They can be
With
called...
or without cause.
It says may be removed with or without cause, thank you, and may appoint sub-members in case of death removal. Just to give you an example what it would entail, the sewer committee article in the Fayetteville Code of Ordinances is 3 paragraphs, which is 2 paragraphs longer than what even established the hospital commission in Eureka Springs. And it just basically says there's hereby established a sewer committee pursuant to state law. The sewer committee shall be composed of 4 aldermen who serve at the pleasure of the entire city council. The mayor may appoint, subject to city council approval, all members, including replacement members of the sewer committee. B, shall have all powers, duties, responsibilities as provided in the code as I just read. All actions, recommendations must be ratified and approved by city council to be effective. The sewer committee is also designated advisory authority over the clean water system of the city. And that's Fayetteville's Code of Ordinances. It's not an attempt, contrary to some comments I've gotten, that of council to run a department of the city. It's a state law that says we're required to have a committee that runs the sewer.
Okay. You want to deal with that at a later date, or?
I'd like to.
I'd like to move to defer this till the next meeting, so we do have a chance to look at it.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Motion made and seconded to defer to the next meeting in December. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Number 10, discussion of procedure for appointing commission vacancies. Ms. Ballance and Mr. Pownall.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Floor is open. Yes, ma'am.
The procedure we're following now for appointing commission vacancies comes from our city code book. And it says that the mayor shall nominate candidates. And then it says that, I'm paraphrasing here, and I know how everybody hates that, but I'm going to do it so I don't have to look it up. It says that the council, with the council's approval. Now, the mayor gets to nominate the candidate, and then if it doesn't pass, the mayor also gets to vote on whether the candidate passes or not. So to me, that seemed maybe a little bit of excessive. Maybe it seemed to me like there was kind of a bottleneck where all the applications are going to the mayor, and one person gets to decide whether anybody is eligible to serve, or whether they want to bring that forward. So I was thinking maybe it might be a little more democratic if maybe all the applications went, for instance, to the city clerk, and then the city clerk distributed the applications to all of us, and each of us had the opportunity to nominate or not nominate somebody as they chose. And so I was wondering if what we could do about that, and so I wrote to Mr. Schoen. And Mr. Schoen said, state statute does not require that the mayor nominate planning commissioners. And as a matter of fact, I've looked in the state code, and it also does not say that the mayor has to nominate HDC. It says that the mayor can appoint them with the approval of city council. So I'm hoping that maybe we can change this so there's not a bottleneck there. So there's not one person deciding who sits on all the commissions, because that seems like a really good opportunity for somebody who wasn't ethical and perhaps was partisan to load those commissions with people, not even give us a chance to bring certain people forward for that. So when we're thinking about that, I want everybody to think about, what if I was the mayor? Or what if somebody that I agreed with all the time was mayor, and all the applications had to go to me, and I was the only one who could nominate anybody? So I just kind of want you to think about that, and think about whether you think that's healthy for one person to be able to say who can sit on who can be nominated and who cannot. I think it would be much more healthy and much more democratic for all of us to be able to decide whether we want to nominate someone or whether we don't. And so since it is in ordinance form in our books, it would take changing these ordinances for the planning and HDC, because it does say now that the mayor and the mayor alone nominates. So I'm asking you please to think about this, to think about what if the shoe was on the other foot. I know some of you, if I was the mayor, you would not want me to be the only one who could bring forth nominations to this table. So I'm asking you to do that. So I would move